Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. As always, I am Brian Doyle and I'm here with you today. And this is going to be a little bit different type of episode than we've talked about in the past. I've had a number of you come up to me and say, one of the things that I'd like to learn better is how to engage with the enterprise and how to really look at getting into those larger scale opportunities and what are some of the steps we need to take. So I'm inviting a good friend of mine, somebody I've known for a long time who comes from that space, who might be able to tell you a little bit better on how you can engage and potentially win within the enterprise space. So, with that, I'd like to introduce Rob Warshaw to the stage. Rob, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Brian, great to see you again. Long time.
So, Rob is somebody I've known for about 20 years. He spent the majority of his career in one of the Fortune 10 healthcare concerns out in the market space. And he and I had a cup of coffee working together as well. And really, during that time, and I've shared these stories a little bit, you really see that the enterprise is a different beast than what you're moving down market. And a lot of you MSPs have expressed that desire to break into that market. And obviously, there's huge rewards if you can. Contract sizes tend to be bigger, opportunities tend to be larger, and things can be pretty sticky. And you're not doing some of the negotiations over and over and over again that you do down in the SMB space. But there are some things to consider. So I've asked Rob to join us today, really give some of his insights, and he'll share a little bit about his company, Digistratix, as well. And we can kind of dive in from there. But Rob, maybe share first with folks a little bit about your background and why I think you're the right person to talk about this.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So I come from the healthcare industry. I've got over 30 years of experience, pretty broad experience from technology to operations to business strategy and technology strategy. So I've kind of seen a lot of different things throughout 30 years. I was there for the start of the internet, if you believe it or not, in terms of building applications, using those types of capabilities all the way to current day, where we're looking at AI really transforming the world, much like the internet did back in the mid to late 90s. So um, I've had a lot of great partnerships over the years with companies outside of uh, the companies that I've worked for and supported, and hopefully I can shed light and give you some tips relative to what ways that it might make it easier to get engaged or involved with those sorts of companies.
So, Rob, let's kind of dig in a little bit. I'm a smaller vendor. What should I expect if I'm actually even trying to get in with the enterprise? I mean, is it as simple as just going to those procurement sites and adding my name there? Or do I really need to kind of have can I expect anything out of that? Or do I really need to have a sponsor getting me through the process?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a mixture of both, Brian. So typically there is a formal process that you need to follow. And folks, it depends on the organization you're working with. In large, complex organizations where you have procurement groups separate from business groups, separate from technology teams, there's usually a fairly rigorous process just to get your name on the list, so to speak, as a quote unquote approved vendor to work with. But that's step one, but it shouldn't be done in a serial nature. So while you're going to finish, I think you really want to do a couple things. One, you want to really understand what problem it is you're trying to solve and how it benefits your customer. If you come to the table with a whole bunch of capabilities, but can't really speak the language of the company that you're trying to engage with in terms of the problems that you can solve on their behalf, I think it's really hard to make a whole lot of headway. And that's where I've seen a lot of room for improvement in the supplier community. Is it's not just a bag full of capabilities that you're trying to bring to the table. It's the companies that can demonstrate an understanding of the industry that you're supporting, the challenges and headwinds that lie in front of them, and how you can play a role in helping them solve their problems. So that's one big piece of it. The other is all about relationships, right? I think it's once you get through the formal application process to become an approved supplier, you really have to work your relationships to make sure that you're getting to the right people. You can spend time doing all sorts of sales pitches, and if it's not to the right group at the right other core pieces, influence your ability to get to the table to tell your story, because that could be the hardest part of all, is just getting a seat at the table to have that discussion, to tell your value story and how you can make a difference for the company that you're trying to sell to.
And that's a great point right there, Rob, because having been on both sides of the table, both in the MSP space, going after enterprise clients, we used to work with some of the large financial organizations, some of the more entertainment-based organizations, and it's really easy to get lost inside those organizations and find yourself talking to the wrong people who can't get you to the right step. So I don't know your thoughts on this, but it's almost like you have to start building your own organizational chart about who you're talking to and what roads these people work to. If you don't know who's two steps above them and two steps to the other side, you can all of a sudden find yourself off course. You have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do. I would say that doing that org chart as you described and understanding who the players are, who reports to who makes the decisions, and who's going to be a supporter of yours, who could be someone that might having a good what all that looks like, I do think is a really important part of kind of the exploration process when you're trying to get into a company for the first time. I think especially the larger the company, the more complex the company, the more important that type of understanding is. That helps you make sure that you're spending time and prioritizing your time with the right folks who can help you get the right conversation started.
And that kind of brings us into another area, which is get the right, setting the right expectation for yourself on how long this is going to take. I know as we were going into new logos, it usually started with we had a relationship that allowed us to get walked into the door. We took a couple meetings to kind of get a sense of what they needed to see if it even aligned to what we offered. And then when we started working on the opportunity, I think an MSP, needs to understand this doesn't mean we're 90 days away from a deal. These things could take a year, sometimes even two to build. And yes, while there's huge rewards on the other side, expect a journey. You've led some of those journeys, Rob. Maybe you can talk about what the sales cycle timelines look like with a couple of your, vendors that you managed.
Yeah, I think the way I would first describe it is the sales cycle is never as fast as anybody would ever want it to be, right? But the reality is the sales cycle itself is going to be company dependent and most importantly, dependent on what cycle the company that you're trying to engage with is in their journey as they look for capabilities and solutions that you could potentially bring to the table. I'll give you an example. Company may be interested in deploying new AI capabilities to solve, yeah, let's say, a staffing challenge where they're looking to increase productivity 25%. They may already have a roadmap that says we're going to do exploration first. That's going to take 8 weeks. Then we're going to narrow the list down to a few strong candidates. Maybe that's 3 or 4 suppliers. That could be another 8 weeks. Then we're going to have some proof of concepts done that we're going to have suppliers do. So it's definitely not going to be on your timeline. And I think the companies that do the best when it comes to vetting out suppliers to fill a need, conducting all the proper activities that go along with that, it's going to take, again, longer than anybody would like. Now, I think the good news is with some of the things that are happening, especially in AI, and I think AI is impacting other capabilities adjacent to it, even outside of it, and as it relates to speed. The speed is something that everybody's going after, and the reality is something that might have taken 6 to 12 months to do a couple of years ago. That's no longer acceptable, and you're seeing those time frames compress because of the pressure that is coming on nearly every large organization as it relates to driving costs and efficiencies into their organizations. They can be more competitive, especially in the world that we live in today. Those timeframes are coming down and becoming shorter, but they can be lengthy at times depending on what problem it is you're trying to solve.
Yeah, and my word of caution out to you as MSPs in the community, make sure that this enterprise deal isn't the only deal you're chasing. You've got to make sure that you've got that mixture of opportunities that you can harvest relatively quickly, under the usual less than 90-day timeline while you're chasing these, bigger opportunities, because they will, Rob, you're even talking about as they get faster, you're probably still talking about 6 months, 3 months minimally versus the 12 to 18 months that often, face things. And, you've got to be able to financially weather the storm of chasing that deal, or it could be the one that kills you too. So Rob,
Yeah,
we're
I
you know
mean, to your point, Brian, on large complex deals with large complex organizations, I've seen a decision made, let's say on day 120, but the actual execution of the contract not happen for another 3 or 4 months because all the proper steering committees and executive level conversations and other activities have to happen along with papering the deal, getting the language right, and everything else that goes along with it. There's just a lot that goes in, especially with some of the larger deals.
so so with that, with that being said, I'm now on my journey. I'm in there. I've got the right time expectation. What are the types of things that I can do as a vendor to try to set myself apart, but also not put, the cringe factor into it as well, right? You've seen people go over the top to try to, win some opportunities. What are some of the expectations you have as a buyer when you're dealing with a vendor as you're moving through the sales cycle? What do you expect out of them?
Sure. A couple things I look for, Brian. One is I want to know that the company that's trying to sell me products and services, that they really care about the relationship long term, that this isn't just an opportunity to try to get a foot in the door, make a quick sale, and hope to get recurring revenue and not have a lot come from that. 'Cause once you get to that point, it's a commodity type business, and that's not really what I was looking for in the various roles that I've held. What I want to see is that the supplier looks at this as I do, as a long-term strategic relationship, and from that they can expect growth as I start to grow my business. But I want to know that they actually understand the business. So one of the things I want to see is I want to see the supplier come to sit down at the table with me and talk about their ideas to help me by demonstrating that they understand the pressures and the headwinds that I'm facing. Healthcare is a great industry to use as an example. If a supplier can't demonstrate to me that they understand the headwinds that are hitting that industry from a regulatory compliance perspective, margin pressure perspective, or from other avenues, if they can't demonstrate some of those basic principles, I'm not sure that they're the right long-term strategic partner for me. So I really want to know that they care about the industry that I'm in, they understand the business, and they're here to help me solve problems, not just have me bring challenges to the table for them to solve. But I want to know that we're in this together.
Yeah, and Rob, if I can jump in with some things that we did when we were chasing deals with some of our larger enterprise customers to kind of showcase that, you've got this period of time you're waiting for decisions to be made. How do you stay engaged? And the way we used to do it and show value in the process was, we understood where the gaps were. That came out during our sessions. We understood who some of the other players, not necessarily the ones we were directly competing with, but other technologies that might be supporting this ecosystem that we're a part of with the project that we're going to do. And we'd go out and make some relationships with those groups and maybe offer lunch and learns or invite them to a conference where we know that some of the speakers that were going to be part of that conference were directly tied to the enterprise. But as you know, Rob, oftentimes your groups might not be able to get the budget to go to that show unless a vendor sponsors it. So we would try to find out, what are some of the events that you want to go to? What are some of the things that you want to do where we might be able to secure you access and the ability to go to them and get that information you need, totally justifiable under what you're trying to accomplish in your role with no strings attached, but also to show value that we understand what the market is, who the right speakers are, where to get the information is. I don't know how that sits in your head, but that was definitely something that was well received in some of the enterprises we worked with.
Yeah, I think some of those larger scale conferences can be a great way to network, a great opportunity to meet people, but also a great opportunity to see what other companies, some of your competitors, some other companies that may not be competitors to you, that might have ideas that you can bring back to your company to build out new capabilities, support the industries that you support. I think those are great to do. Examples could be, believe it or not, the Consumer Electronics Show that's in Vegas every year. There is some really incredible technology that's on display there that spans nearly every industry and every type of product you can think of, that just can get your mind thinking about, what can my company do that might be along the lines of some of these products that could benefit my industry in ways that maybe I wasn't thinking before. Outside of that, of course, you want to go to the larger, more impactful conferences that are industry specific that support the customer bases that your company and the organizations, the folks watching today, that they all support day in day out. Networking is absolutely an important piece of the puzzle here, of course, but I also would tell you, don't miss out on the benefits that come with going to those conferences, see what everybody else is doing. Probably opportunity to learn a lot from them along the way.
Yeah. So even if you're not able to secure, the opportunity for your potential prospect, you've got to show that you're showing up at those things too. And with social and everything else, it makes it really easy to let your buyer know that, hey, by the way, you were at XYZ conference trying to understand better what the market forces are. And even if it's not something you're doing hand in hand with them, it often shows them that your company's making the investments to better understand how they can cater to that market. They're getting involved. I think we'd all agree taking a full day out of the office is hard sometimes, and showing that level of investment definitely can play into it as well. Rob, so let's we've talked about some steps you can take to potentially get in there and some of the expectations.
I think it's
Oh, go ahead, please.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was saying, I
Okay.
want to be wary of the time we have left together too. And, we've talked a little bit about, what expectations you have in terms of timeline, what steps you can take to further advance the relationship when you're, waiting for the deal to close, or as you're working the deal to close. Maybe you'd like to share some things that are surefire disqualifiers, things that make you immediately go, you know what, that vendor's not for us during that process as well, so people can understand, at least from your purview, what they should stay away from.
Yeah, a little bit ties to my comments earlier. If I feel like a company is pushing capabilities that don't align to what it is, what the problems that I'm trying to solve or my company's trying to solve for, that's a quick disqualifier. I've had many examples throughout the 30 years where somebody's trying to sell me a hammer, but I need a saw. And it's not the right tool for the job. And the fact that they didn't realize that before they presented it to me, that's a red flag. If I get the feel that they don't understand where my business is headed longer term and how it can benefit us collectively together, again, and that would just demonstrate that they're not doing their homework. They're not spending enough time to understand my company. They're not spending enough time to understand the industry that we serve, and they don't see kind of the long game, if you will. And if I start to feel like they're too focused on the short game, that would be another red flag. The last, and maybe this would be the biggest, is when I start to think about leveraging new suppliers. One of the obvious things I want to know is who are your current customers and what do they think about you. And typically you'll get a list of reference clients from the supplier. That's great, but the fact that list came from the supplier, it kind of has a one-sided view, if you will. I don't think I was ever given a reference client by a supplier that didn't fully support the client in question, right? So you've got to do your own homework, find out who worked with the supplier that you're engaged with in these discussions, and in your evaluation, and go off script a bit and seek out discussions with customers who may not be on the reference list, so you can make sure that you're getting a fair and valid perspective of their performance.
I'm kind of glad you went down that road a little bit, because, another thing I often see when folks are trying to get into the enterprise, they get this connection. You and me know each other, Rob, and we like each other. So you go, hey, yeah, I can get you a meeting at my office if you want, but I'm showing up into an area where I have no experience, right? And that can be problematic too. And that was an argument I used to have with my former CEO, because I'm like, we've never done that work. We don't have anything to reference. We've never done it at their scale. And we've never been in that vertical. Oh, yeah, but we can get to it. If we just talk our way through it, we'll figure it out along the way. And I think, then being on the other side of the table, being, on the vendor management side in the enterprise, you guys don't have time to train. And I think that's an important part too.
Mhm.
You've
Yeah,
got to
I
come.
think you bring up a good point. I mean, yeah, the reality of it is, if you're not a Microsoft and Amazon or a Google and you're trying to get into a large enterprise for the first time, you're going to get one at bat, right? And if you strike out in that one at bat, you not only lost that opportunity, but you probably lost future opportunities for an extended period of time. So you definitely want to be cognizant of what it is that you're undertaking as part of this discussion. Are you really ready to have the conversation? Have you thought through all the questions that are going to be thrown your way, the softballs and the fastballs, because there's going to be plenty of difficult questions that are asked of you. And if you're not ready to have that conversation, my guidance and my advice would be to push it out a little bit, even if it's 2 4 weeks, whatever it takes for you to be fully prepared to have that conversation. Because the worst thing you can do is walk into that conversation, get the opportunity that you've been really trying to get after for a couple of years, and just fail because you weren't prepared. Preparation is absolutely key, and it will be crystal clear to the client that you're trying to secure whether or not you are ready and prepared to begin with, and you just don't want that bad impression right out of the gate.
Yeah. And to your point, you get that one shot at the title, and if you do not hit it the right way, it is almost impossible to get back in, at least with that same collection in that same group where, folks were involved, anytime soon, if ever. We had an experience like that early on where the person that was supposed to be leading the presentation was subsequently let go the day before the presentation. And instead of letting us punt, ownership decided that we should still go. And there wasn't anybody in the room that could speak as well as that person that was relieved of their duties. And we got laughed out of the room. You know what I mean? And we never got back. And it's shameful. So, all right, Rob. Well, we're near the end of our time. I don't know if you have
that falls under
continue on. No, continue on your thought. We're going to do some editing.
I was just going to say in that regard, think about it not just in terms of your own preparation for the meeting, but you also want to be respectful of the other folks in the room from the client that you're trying to garner work from, right? Because it is somewhat disrespectful to walk into that room to the client if you're not prepared. Let's say they bring 4 or 5 people, they're fairly senior level people. You're wasting their time. Time is money. The bad taste just snowballs from there. So making sure you're not just prepared, but to your point, you've got the right people to do the presentation. If you have somebody that became ill or they left the company last second, you definitely want to take a step back, take a deep breath. And as much as you might not want to push that discussion out a couple of weeks, it's probably the best thing to do.
Yeah. Well, Rob, we're getting near the end of our time today. Just, want to open up the floor if you've got any closing thoughts, anything else you'd like to add before we break?
Just guide some guidance to the community, Brian, that you serve and support is, and I'll go back to some of the themes that I mentioned earlier. When you get that opportunity at bat, make sure you know your customer, the challenges that they're facing in the industry and around them, know the value that you can bring to the table that solves the problems that directly align to those challenges that they're faced with, and make sure and be prepared and do a great job at selling your value story. And I think things will take it from there.
Awesome. Well, Rob, thanks for joining me today. I think you've given some folks some food for thought if they are looking to, move up and start chasing into the enterprise. We'll certainly put a link to your LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to connect with Rob, ask some other questions, we'll make it easy for you to do so. And, as we go by, I'll share with you stories of success that we hear that came out of these kind words that you've shared with our audience today. But with that said, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you all again soon.